All right, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
We have public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed that part. Public input. Anybody in the audience or online or over that wants to come and present anything to the board? Yeah, it'll be limited to 5 minutes. Just need you to come up and state your name and address, please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Chad Bishop. I live at 7405 South Valencia Drive here in Sioux Falls, but in Lincoln County. Preface. One of my favorite quotes is from a letter from physicist Richard P. Feynman writing to a student who had found an error in his textbook. It says, "You should, in science, believe logic and arguments, carefully drawn and not authorities." Now he can say that. I would never say that. I would say you should always trust your authorities until they give you reason not to. I first spoke to this joint meeting of these two bodies on August 24th of last year. That statement and the 13 others to the City Council are provided as a reference if you're curious. At that time, I was attempting to draw public attention to what I perceived was a false dichotomy, a false choice, a politically artificial division being crafted between the voluntarily vaccinated and the unvaccinated. There was a large and growing category that is not being acknowledged. It was the COVID-19 recovered. My family and I are in that group. My perspective is a bit different, as no healthcare provider in the country will give me a flu shot. I had Guillain-Barré as a child. So I look at this a little differently. That night when I spoke, the focus of my statement was on the use of serology to try to help folks discern their immune status, whether that be a panel of antibody tests or an adaptive T-cell response assay. For the past several months, the unvaccinated have been unwelcome in the cities of Minneapolis, Boston, Chicago, New York, LA, and our nation's capital. Enforcing mandates and vaccine credentials in these cities deprive citizens of access to public services, restaurants, health clubs, education, regardless of whether they were antibody positive or not. For the prior year, we had been given a crash course of what it would take to achieve herd or community immunity. In the early days, before politicization, those who endured exposure and infection to help others and keep the country running were heroes. What happened? When it was announced in July of 2020, the Sanford Survive study was reported to help us know more about their, being healthcare professionals, potential exposure to the virus, how their immune systems responded overall, more about the virus itself, so that we might all better understand COVID-19. Given its reported size and scope, it could prove to be one of the most important pieces of epidemiological work ever done in South Dakota. Even though 1 year since the initial duration of the study has passed in July of 2021, the data and results have yet to be published. The way it was designed, it could tell us how many of Sanford's staff and the South Dakota healthcare professionals in general became SARS-CoV-2 antibody positive over the course of the year it was conducted. I know I would love to read it once it's published. It would be a feather in their cap, or perhaps Mr. Krabenhoff's. Since August, we have discovered that the vaccines offered against the SARS-CoV-2 virus and the resulting COVID-19 infection do not confer sterilizing immunity, although they tried. It does not prevent infection. It does not prevent transmission. These alone effectively destroy any argument for any COVID-19 vaccine mandate, but there are more. The vaccines on offer do not confer mucosal IgA immunity through an intramuscular injection into the arm, nor do they prevent the fully vaccinated from carrying a viral load equivalent to that of the unvaccinated. On January 19th, we get this tidbit from the CDC. A study, the results of which are summarized in this figure, demonstrates the efficacy of infection-induced immunity to exceed that of vaccination alone in terms of the risk of hospitalization. With that said, the vaccines do, however, reduce the risk of hospitalization and risk of death for those who are most at risk. Targeted protection of the elderly, the clinically obese, the diabetic, and the immunosuppressed has been and remains the right strategy, but Dr. Fauci smeared the fringe epidemiologists advocating for that policy as signatories to the Great Barrington Declaration. Fringe from Harvard, Oxford, and Stanford. On February 14th, in an article entitled COVID and Reinfections and Breakthroughs, Infections Take Big Jump in South Dakota, Mr. Ellis of the Argus Leader writes of the most recent wave, but for serious outcomes, the numbers are likely closer to the mark, and they continue to demonstrate prior infection vaccines are reliable. Of the known breakthrough cases, only 4.5% resulted in hospitalization, and only 1.7% of reinfections result in hospitalization. The data for the Department of Health runs over 24 months. He is basing this assessment on the data he received from our own State Department of Health. I would like to now draw your attention to the op-ed in The Hill on February 17th, co-authored by the previous director of the CDC, Dr. Robert Redfield. Its title, "A Test to Determine COVID-19 Immunity Could Reshape U.S. Policy." Sounds like a good idea.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to come up and speak?